In part 2 of the art of cutting, we looked at making a cut when your defender slides to the ball or to another player. In this part, we're going to talk about cutting when your defender turns her head away from you to look at the ball or to look at another player. This happens frequently because every defender has to be ready to help with team defense. A good defender usually has her head on a swivel and is constantly switching her eyes back and forth between the attacker she is covering and the ball carrier and other players in the offense. You can see in this clip how many times a defender will turn her head in the average play. But sometimes you can catch your defender ball watching just a little too long and you can cut past or to get open for a feed. In this clip, the defender down on the elbow gets caught up watching the play developing up top. Her attacker recognizes this and cuts behind her for a feed and a goal. Looking at this again, you can see the situation facing the defender on the 8-meter elbow. When her teammate, number 29 in white, slides to a cutter, the defender on the elbow isn't sure whether or not she needs to slide up to 24 in green. Also, the cutter on the elbow did a good job of waiting for the first cutter to clear through before she made her cut. Here is another example where a defender is marking an off-ball player near the crease and gets too focused on the ball carrier. In the replay, you'll see the defender marking her attacker. And you'll see she's providing very good coverage in the opening part of this play. Watch how the cutter uses the distraction created by the ball carrier to separate from her defender and then exploits the two players in the middle as an obstacle to maintain her separation while she makes a curl cut for the ball. So let's move on and talk about some tactical principles of cutting when your defender turns her head. In part 1, we talked about getting close to your defender before you cut, and it's really important in this kind of cut. In this play, the cutter starts out here, pretty far away from her defender, but as the play develops, she's going to get close to her defender to reduce the defender's reaction time when she makes her cut. In this example, notice how the cutter is out near the 12-meter line and her defender is near the 8-meter line. This gives the defender a lot of space to react to the cutter. Looking at this again, even though the defender initially has her head turned to the ball, she is able to look back, see the cutter begin her run, and recover enough to cover the cutter and discourage the feeder. So, before you cut, get close to your defender. Having said this, it's important to recognize that getting close to your defender is a principle and not a rule. There are exceptions. In this clip, which we have already seen, the cutter is not very close to her defender, but the cut is successful because of the geometry of the cutter, her defender, and the ball carrier, and the fact that the defender turns the wrong way. The cutter is able to generate separation from her defender and maintain it throughout the cut. The second principle is aligning your defender with the ball carrier. If you can make subtle movements so that you position your defender in a pretty straight line between you and the ball carrier, then your defender can't watch you and watch the ball at the same time. You are forcing her to turn her head pretty far away from you in order to look at the ball carrier. In this play, the feeder is here and the cutter is here. Watching the replay, notice how the cutter aligns her defender with the ball as the ball carrier sweeps down from the 12-meter fan to the 8-meter elbow. At this point, the defender has turned her head to the ball and the cutter makes her move to the net. Once you understand the concept of aligning your defender with the ball carrier, the next principle is to think about where you are positioned in relation to the ball. Is the ball carrier on the opposite side of the offensive formation? Or is she next to you? If the ball is adjacent to you, for example, your defender is probably the first slide to the ball carrier, and she's going to pay a lot of attention to what the ball carrier is doing. This is where you get an opportunity to make a cut. In this play, the ball is at goal line extended and the cutter is up at the top of the 12. When we look at this again, notice the geometry here. The cutter wasn't really close to her defender, but if you look at the football hash marks, you'll see that the cutter did a really good job of aligning her defender with the ball. Next, we're going to look at certain positions on the field and certain moments when you are likely to see your defender turn her head to the ball. The 8-meter elbow is one place on the field where a defender has to worry about sliding to an adjacent ball carrier, and this makes her really vulnerable to backdoor cuts when she turns her head. In this clip, watch the cutter on the elbow here, and watch her defender who has to worry about the attacker coming from behind the net. Here's the feeder, here's the defender turning her head, and here's the cutter off the elbow. This play happens in the same game about 4 minutes later, with the same cutter, the same defender, and the same ball carrier. This just goes to show, if you're playing on the elbow as a cutter, look for these opportunities. We've looked at a lot of situations where the ball carrier dodges and this causes your defender to turn her head away from you. In these next few examples, we're going to look at some other situations where you can anticipate that your defender will take her eyes off you and you can make a cut. If your defender is giving out directions to her teammates, look for her to raise her arm and point to a spot where she wants someone to move. She almost definitely is not looking at you when she does this. Watch the defender here raise her arm and watch the cutter on the other side of the net exploit this. Here, the defender down near the goal circle is pointing and giving some directions to her teammates. She continues doing this, and her attacker exploits the defender's distraction to make a cut across the front of the goal. Flip plays represent another situation that can be a huge distraction for off-ball defenders. Here is an example where several defenders get caught watching the ball and the cutter exploits the situation. Looking at the replay, there are 3 off-ball defenders looking at the ball exchange during the flip. This attacker is too far out to make an effective cut, but the inside attacker is in a better position to cut. Another moment when your defender almost always turns her head is when you pass the ball to a teammate. When you pass the ball, your defender will usually look away to see where the ball goes. This creates a perfect opportunity for a give and go play. A give and go is a simple play. You start with the ball on your stick and you pass the ball to a teammate. As soon as you pass, you immediately cut to the net and you look for a quick return pass from your teammate. One of the easiest ways to create a give and go is to make a pass to the opposite side of the offense. If your defender follows the ball with her eyes, she'll have to turn her head pretty far away from you, and she'll likely lose sight of you when you begin your cut. Here, the attacker up top throws the ball to an open teammate on the low wing position. Looking at this again, notice how the defender turns her head as soon as 36 makes her pass. Number 36 takes advantage of this with a nice front door cut. You can also run a give and go from the 8-meter elbow. Unsettled situations, such as fast breaks, are perfect times to run a give and go. Here, watch the defender turn her head as soon as the pass is made. Here's another example. The defender who should have covered the cutter is here, but you'll see that she turned her head to follow the pass. Here's a fast break give and go following a scramble for a ground ball. Looking at the replay, you can see that when the ball carrier makes her pass, two of the closest defenders turn to look at where the ball went and don't notice the cutter right away. Here's a quick review about cutting when your defender turns her head. 1. Get close to your defender, but remember that this is a principle and not a hard rule. 2. Align your defender between you and the ball carrier as much as you can. 3. Think about where you are positioned in relation to the ball. Just remember that cutting when your defender turns her head is one of the hardest types of cuts to make. It requires patience, timing, the ability to manipulate your defender, and the ability to exploit what she's giving you in terms of position and how much she turns her attention away from you. But if you can get good at this type of cut, it also presents the largest number of cutting opportunities in a game. I hope this was helpful. In part 4, we'll look at cutting to make space for a dodger. Thanks again for watching.